Call this meeting to order. First with the roll call. Director Craig Carter.
Here.
Director Jack Jacobs.
Here.
Director Robert Skinner.
Here.
Vice Chair David Haslam.
Here.
Chair Eric Lawson.
Here.
First item on the agenda is the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for gathering your people in this room, Father. Thank you for all the guidance that you give us throughout the day. Thank you for the opportunities that you give us to see and walk in someone else's shoes now and then, which opens our eyes to different situations. Please lead us and guide us throughout this day in your heavenly name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Keep in mind, this also includes the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the agenda as stated.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Public comment.
She's exempt from giving it to the clerk. She's the clerk.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Bryant. I'm the city clerk. I'm speaking to the people policies item on the consent agenda. You have before you a revised G5 policy on records that's currently under legal review, the Florida Department of State website for records management liaison officers, and the city clerk public records guidelines. This represents 20 pages of policy and process on public records management, mostly drafted in collaboration with the GRU records management liaison officer, the previous one that was working with us at the time. It's important to note that there are criminal penalties for knowingly and unknowingly violating state records law. It is really important to be as detailed as possible with staff. At the city, we not only have the policy, we have given each staff member what we call badge buddies, which is a refresher. So if they can't remember all of the data and the information that we're giving with them and they need something out in the field, we have a shorthand right here at our fingertips. The people policy on public records is a page and a half. The packets in front of you are highlighted with where it has been cherry-picked from our G5 policy and the website where it was copied and pasted from the state of Florida's website on records management liaison officers. So we have over 20 pages condensed down. It leaves blanks and vagaries and staff not knowing exactly what is needed to be done, especially when there's a state mandate to designate somebody custodian for notice of lawsuits, like per Florida Statute 119.12. Last I checked, I'm on your website as that person, but your records policy does not list who that person needs to be. It doesn't have specifics for staff on how to properly intake public records requests, which is a hotbed of risk for an organization if your staff do not have details on how to properly intake public records. And also the training is referenced as mandatory, but the word yearly was removed. And so, public records law gets updated on a regular basis. That is why there is a certification through the Florida Professional Association for Public Records Management. because this is complex and holds a high penalty, and it gets changed all the time, and you need to have yearly trainings. So I just bring this to your attention that we have policy and guidelines in place. And they all recognize GRU in them, but if you feel the need to pass your own, that it needs to be more robust. The page and a half that you have in your backup is inadequate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other public comment,
Is this public comment time?
only for the agenda.
Oh, I see.
Only for the agenda, yes, thank you. Ed, would you like to respond to that before we discuss
Sure.
the agenda?
Sure, it was the intent to put the HR people policy together in a broad fashion to make it non-prescriptive. We plan on having a more robust procedure that underlies those policies. It's kind of like mission, vision, or vision, mission, values. So we plan to incorporate all the items that the city clerk has discussed in our procedures. So it just isn't in the overriding document for people to follow. And I'd also indicate that we've been handling public records for a long time in the organization, and we have institutional knowledge here of how that's performed and accomplished.
Thank you.
I'll ask when, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that's correct.
Okay. It's
Okay.
always good to see if I'm correct.
Thanks, Ed. So back to the board for discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's very serious. I've taken several classes on it when I was on the city commission. I think I went twice a year. I went to an in-person, then I did an online. And virtually every time I went, I learned something new. Nicole Shalley and I and the attorneys there, we bounce back and forth. Is that important? People do go to jail for this. So I highly recommend take a class.
Any other comments on the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes as stated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approval of the minutes. Public comment on approval of the minutes. Seeing none, back to the board. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you again. The next item on the agenda is chair comments.
I have no comments at this time. Are there any other board members that would like to make a comment?
I would, if possible.
Yes.
All right, so we've been under a lawsuit since before I was a member of this, if I'm not mistaken, and we're under a fresh lawsuit that mirrors the original lawsuit. And I'm kind of speaking personally on it, how I feel. So there is public records, which is a good thing you talk about there. And there's a bunch of information on what they're hoping for out of this new lawsuit. I'm going to read just some of it. I'm not going to read all of it because it's a lot of pages, but it says that historically, GRU and its operations have played an outsized role within the city, and particularly the city has regularly withdrawn revenues from GRU and deposited them into the city's general transfer fund. It's universally understood that Gainesville cannot serve its current level of services without a significant contribution from GRU. In short, Gainesville would not be the cultural and educational jewel that it is without political control over GRU and its revenues. So for me, that's pretty good because I've been asking probably, 8 out of the 10 months of here, what does everybody want? Well, there are certainly, not everyone, but there are certainly people, I don't know if they're here tonight or not, but there are certainly people who've said they want political control over GRU and its revenues. Okay, so now I know what you want. Having said that, when the politicians were in charge of GRU, because we're not politicians, we're a board. Okay, so when the politicians were at GRU, it just quickly kind of became communism. They just sort of did what they want and they took what they want. And there's records of it that the GRU, the city, they voted to take GRU, they voted to take more funds from profit than GRU made. We on this board say it was 68 million. Some people in the public say that it was 30 million over the profit. Even if it was only 30 million, that's still irresponsible. When you take unnecessary money, you incur unnecessary debt. unnecessary interest, unnecessary debt's a waste, all right? The last GM, he wanted to increase the charges every year by 1%, and probably honestly more at some point would have been the plan. This board's not doing that. I just wanted to give you the mission of the board, or not the board, me as a member of the board, and we can discuss this with the board further. I'll discuss with them, things of that nature. I want to keep the customers first, because I think that's probably needs to be the most important thing. We still are a business here, okay? So we need to keep our customers first. I would like to be able to retain and hire the best employees available, okay? If there's a lot of nonsense in the air, political this, steal money this, take money that, they're not going to want to work here necessarily. Not the best people. The best people are going to find the best places to work. We need to be the best place to work. I want to take care of our current power plants and other assets, our water company, the other things that we have. I want to take care of those. I want to make them the best that they can be. We want to maintain them. We do want to find affordable and eco-friendly power. I know there was some big rigmarole that we turned down the last solar deal. It wasn't the right deal. We're not anti-solar. We're not anti-healthy electric. I think we all want that, but it's got to be economically friendly. It has to be. People are already struggling to pay their bill. We can't make it more expensive, okay? I want to lower the debt, which we've started to, as this board has started to. We've lowered the debt significantly, in my opinion, compared to years past. And yes, we're going to incur more debt. That's business, unfortunately, but we want to keep lowering it, all right? I would like to lower the bills to the customers. That's important to me, okay? As a customer who feels like he has a high bill, because I personally do. I've got a big family. Something's always on. My kids won't turn stuff off, right? I've got a big bill. I want it to come down too, okay? So it's not just, the local control. We're local, guys. You still have local control. And we still give to the transfer fund. So that whole thing about you guys don't have local control, yes, you do. That's what we're here for. That's what the public comments for. That's what every other comment. Tell us what you want and what you hope. Are we going to give you everything? Probably not, because not everything can be done. Because if you do, like I said, it turns into stealing like before. Having said all that, what would be nice, because Ed himself has said that the general transfer fund is a necessary thing, and I agree with that. So it would be nice if we can make enough profit to hopefully give the city that large transfer fund they're wanting, okay? But I want to do everything else first. I want to take care of the customers, the people, the bills. Then once we got everything figured out, then hopefully we could be profitable enough, smart enough to transfer the fund to them. But we got to stop wasting time. We got to stop talking about the same thing every meeting, hopefully. I mean, unless you want to, it's your prerogative, please do it. We got to stop with the nuisance lawsuits, okay? There's been a lawsuit ever since the board, before I was here, since the last board started. If it's a legitimate lawsuit, by all means, I'm not saying don't take your legal rights, but the nuisance stuff, the same old stuff, it's not going well, guys, in my opinion. None of us, we're all volunteers up here, right? We're all doing this for the betterment, hopefully, of the community. Love this community. Been here for 20 plus years. I'm not going anywhere, regardless of what you guys want. I'm staying here. I love it. So that's all I got.
David, thank you. Anybody else like to say anything?
No. Tough act to follow.
Yes,
Okay.
I wrote it down.
in agreement.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is general public comment. These are for items not on the agenda.
Hi, my name's Don Shepherd, and I'm trying to become mayor of the city. And under that aspect, I'm trying to do exactly what you're saying that you're trying to do. I'd like Ed Borowski to honor what he had stated in the commission meeting years ago of a payback to the citizens of $94,000, $98,000 to each customer that he had said. I would like during my term as a mayor or during your term as a representative for that to take place. I don't know where we are at with that, but that's one of the things I'd like to do. I'd like GRU to make accountable to these parking, these apartment houses and these trailer parks to take and stop blaming GRU for their negligence. I live in Lamplier Trailer Park, and ever since I lived there, they said that their utilities are 104 years old. That's water, that's the electric, that's everything that is 104 years old. They have been selling it and changing names to get by all this. I found out through an attorney that this is how they're getting by, not having GRU or the Public Works come in and upgrade the systems within their park. I think every apartment house, every rental place needs to be looked at so that we can stop putting the blame on GRU. I also want the park and recreation people to be accountable for their outpay that they're saying that they're not going to take and help the city in their payout to different programs. And this here, I learned today that they're supposedly not doing it. Well, I don't believe it. But stop blaming GRU for your problems. That's my number one topic. Another topic is that we will take and work with you to take and help you to take and get done the things you need to get done. And as a mayor, that's what should have been done all along. Instead of dipping into GRU funds, wild places and other kind of funds, to pay their general fund. They are responsible, and I love the ideal that GRU stepped back and said, no, this is not my problem. This is your problem, city mayor. And it's been a problem for years, but nobody took and stepped up to the plate till GRU woken them through this lawsuit and made them accountable for their actions, not for the actions of the city and mayors that have
Thank you, sir.
kicked it down the road. And that's the phrase they've been using for years. I'm kicking the can down the road to the next mayor. Oh, hello, how many mayors?
Sir, your
100
time
years.
has expired.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was thinking about a light, so thank you.
Good evening, sir. Syed Muhammad Iqtidar Haider. I appeared last time in your meeting, and this time I just came here. I sent the email to our honorable CEO to know after my receiving information, the GRU have sent what they have done with the 1010 work, how they have communicated, whether they have sent that information also to their attorney or not, yes or no. This is my concern right now. If you respond me back, I will appreciate. I have sent the email to all of you also, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
My name's Chris Russell. I was here last month asking about the removal of fluoride from our drinking water. First off, I'd like to say, David, thank you for what you said, to making it clear about the mission of this authority, your purpose. Like I said last month, I've been treating water in the state of Florida for 20 years. I have the highest level of licensure to treat water in the state of Florida. If you had a problem with your car, you're not going to call me. You're not going to call a dentist. You're going to call a mechanic. If you had a problem with your heart, you'd call your cardiologist, not your dentist. If you had a problem with your water, I would hope that you would call someone like myself. My experience with hydrofluorosilicic acid is limited, but I understand its chemical composition. I understand what it does. Anybody who works in utilities, they understand what an SDS sheet is, okay? OSHA says you have to have it on every chemical on site. This is hydrofluorosilicic acid. That little skull and crossbones right there, that represents acute toxicity. That means the hydrofluorosilicic acid will kill you quickly. It's a very dangerous chemical. All right? We're injecting that in our water. 110 something thousand gallons last year alone. Costs roughly $300,000. $300,000 that did not need to be spent. It is not required by law to fluoridate your water. It's an additive. It's an additive that does not, unfortunately, from the utilities perspective, come with a warning label. This is really determined to come at me. This is your typical warning label on a tube toothpaste. And what it says is that if ingested more than what's being used, call poison control immediately. Why do you think that is? It's not because of the calcium in the toothpaste. It's because of the fluoride. There's studies that are out there. There's research that's been done. I understand the purpose behind it originally. 1946, GRU was the first one to start fluoridating the water. Why? To improve oral health. Great, it's 2025. There are too many natural sources of fluoride, one of them right here with a warning label on it that's available. We do not need to put it in our water. That's just the short of it. You're gonna save the money by not doing it. But I would ask that this authority put it on the agenda. Don't take my word for it. Don't take the dentist's word for it. Well water does not cause cavities. Number one cause of cavities, the ADA will tell you this, is poor oral hygiene, not brushing and flossing, eating sugary foods. It's not fluoride in the water. 2025, we can stop doing this. There's studies that show it, and what I'm asking here tonight, I'm not asking you to stop fluoridating the water. I'm asking you to do the research. Do your due diligence. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. I am actually going to touch on two things tonight. Angela Castile, I don't think I said that. But the first thing I would like to address is the agenda. I believe that it's supposed to be out 7 days prior to the meeting. This time it was not. It was 2 days prior to the meeting. So I've been watching and trying to find it, and that was an issue that I had. The second thing is the fluoride in the water. I don't get the option to take the fluoride out of the water except to ask you guys to take it out of the water, because I myself do not want the fluoride in my water. Knowing what the health risks are, knowing what the chemical is now that is put into the water, and knowing that there is a huge risk of toxicity, especially even towards the workers having to put it in the water. So I thank you. I ask that you just cease the fluoride, put it on the agenda. Thank you. Have a nice
Thank you.
day.
Hello, thank you for your work on GRU's behalf. Appreciate it. My name is Tana Silva, and I sent you, I think, 3 emails so far about water fluoridation, and I gave a copy to the manager in print. And before I skim through a few points in the emails, I'd like to mention 2 personal observations about fluoridation. One is a get-together about 3 weeks ago with a dozen of my Florida cousins, all raised on farms with well water, as were our elder generation. All of us, as far as I know, with their natural teeth, still into their 60s, 70s, and now 80s. And same with our elders who grew up on a farm outside of St. Augustine, with teeth intact. My brothers and sisters and I in different places, also with not fluoridated water, are still hanging under our teeth. And the last aunt passed away last year at 98 with her natural teeth. Okay. I only thought of that at your last meeting, when a person attributed his bad teeth to well water. Both are only anecdotal. And so the other thought that I had before I forget it is a personal experience I thought about was a cardiology presentation here. I mean, this building, but in Gainesville, several years ago, quite a few years ago, where the cardiologist announced that if he could, he would add statins to the public water supply. That makes about as much sense as putting toxic waste into the water supply. So to my 3 overall questions that I emailed you, I would add that I see no way to count dental caries. Do dentists count them and report them, to whom, much less how to correlate, dental caries with the infinite number of factors and variables that affect people's health and teeth. So anyway, my main three questions are these, and I'll be quick. The three basic questions about fluoridation of water supplies need consideration. One, why adding fluoridation chemicals to public water supplies was ever allowed in the first place. Two, what effects it has in humans, other animals, plants, and ecosystems. Three, what interests benefit and continue defending it. So one, very quickly, why it was added, I'm sorry, I'm running out of time. All the above. Effects that they have on all kinds of systems. There is no safe level of industrial fluoridation chemicals. They are toxic throughout all species and systems. And three, what interests and benefit and continue defending it. Basically, the phosphate industry is huge. Okay.
Thank you.
And I have like 45 pages of research to give you a head start on what the gentleman requested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chuck Ross. Nice speech, Mr. Haslam.
Thank
Doesn't
you.
agree with everything you said, but your intentions are good, I think.
They are.
The first thing I want to the first thing I want to ask again about is when we're going to get an update on the IRP that the Chair Lawson had made clear he wanted to see the costs and risks of extending the life. Now, I see that in the agenda there is a state of the utility, so maybe it can be addressed there. Second thing also related to that would be, let's see. Well, no, not necessarily. That's not related to that. Excuse me. I have went over the what you call the GAP GRUA fiscal 25 financial update. It's actually for the first quarter, which is December 31, 24. So when I went to it, it shows starting off on the second page, I think, of a profit of 3.1 million. But also on the website is, which wasn't attached to the agenda, is the GAP financial statements, which show a loss of 3.2. Now, I think I figured out what it is after talking to someone, and I think it's the transfer of the rate of the monies to the rate stabilization fund. I think they're not included in the budget update. The problem is it says GAP GRUA, which is confusing because the statement online is GAP and it has a $3.2 million loss. So perhaps that can be explained. And in connection with the rate stabilization fund, when you go over, when you go over the budget, maybe we could perhaps explain how you arrive at the amount of the transfer. And I'm sure there's a formula or something, so we can understand better. I believe that for the quarter, it says on the financial statement for the quarter ended December 31st, the transfer is $7 million. And that might account for my approximately $6 million difference, by the way. So if that's not included in the budget, but the main point is how do you calculate that? How do you determine what you're going to transfer? And one thing I just noticed, that there's a fairly significant amount of bad accounts provided for in what's called the allowance for doubtful accounts. That's an estimate, generally speaking, but it's $12 million. And at the end of June, it was $9 million or $10 million. So it's gone up like $2 million. And maybe that could be addressed as well when we get to the budget update. And let's see if I had anything else. I have 10 seconds. That's about it. That's about it. Oh, there's one important thing. When Mr. Carter, your term is up and you're staying on, I know, but I've made this before and it's important because you're missing a member to represent the county. I've said this before. So when someone gets to replace Mr. Carter, that's important because all of you, well, except for Mr. Lawson maybe, but he represents commercial accounts.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
So, I made this point before.
Howdy, I'm Marshall Clayton Rawson. I don't have anything formal prepared for this evening, but I came out here to support a friend and a good cause, and that cause is to reverse the policy of putting fluoride in our water. It's not a topic that I know an immense degree about, but if there is any risk, even the most minute risk, that it could have negative health side effects by us publicly putting fluoride or any type of medication into our water sources, we should reverse those policies. We have certainly come a long way since the 40s when there was limited knowledge and research on hygiene, dental hygiene, and individuals should be able to make their own decisions on their hygiene, their dental hygiene, and what goes in their mouth and in their bodies. So I am encouraging this board to go down a path of just clean water and nothing else. And so I support reversing the fluoridization of our water sources. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Ramey Eagle Glenn, and I'm going to provide a little bit of a history lesson. Fertilizer for farming comes from Florida phosphate mines. The phosphate rock is treated with sulfuric acid, and as a result of this industry, toxic fluoride gases were released into the atmosphere. This caused vegetation damage, respiratory issues, and acidic emissions. The Clean Air Act of 1970 put an end to this. Wet scrubbers were introduced at phosphate fertilizer plants to capture the fluoride emissions before they were released into the air. This toxic waste product is now converted into fluorosilic acid, and this is what GRU is dumping into our drinking water. Nothing on GRU's website or the most recent water quality report of 2023 informs us that phosphate mining industrial waste is added to our drinking water. If you go to the 2023 report online, and I have a copy if anybody would like to see it, on page 3, you can see fluoride listed as an inorganic contaminant. The report reveals that, yes, fluoride is an additive to GRU water, but then GRU misleads the public by stating fluoride is in our drinking water due to discharge from fertilizer factories. Funny, there are no active phosphate mines anywhere near Gainesville. The only active mines in Florida are all the way down near Polk County in what's called Bone Valley, and one operation up in Hamilton County on the Florida-Georgia border. You can find this information on the Florida DEP website. There is no fertilizer factory discharged in GRU water. I did a Google search. One site came up, Helena Fertilizer in Alachua. I called them and said, "Are you guys a fertilizer factory?" No, we just receive it in bags. I said, "Are there any fertilizer factories around here that you know of?" Maybe up in Mayo. Nowhere on the website can anyone find any information about the addition of fluorosilic acid into our water. Bottom line, the greatest beneficiary of water fluoridation is the phosphate mining industry. Not only do they have a super convenient method of disposing industrial waste into our water, into our bodies, you're paying them to do it. You're buying their industrial waste product. This is not a trend. This is the awakening. This issue is not going away. If you want to look at the science, please refrain from listening to emotional anecdotes. I don't care if the dentist came from Harvard and they worked on a child who lived on a well. I lived on city water. I drank Coca-Cola. I ate lemon heads, and I ate fruit roll-ups. I had a root canal at 24, tons of cavities. Follow the science.
Time's up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, Jim Conish. I would challenge Mr. Haslam to make a motion to direct Mr. Bielarski to no longer collect the soon-to-be increased residential garbage fees in the city of Gainesville on the GRU residential electric bill, and to no longer collect stormwater fees on any GRU electric bill, and instead give the city a chance to let Mr. Power collect this money in a more comprehensive fashion, a more efficient fashion, and for far less cost, sir, and it would be far more equitable. Now, the 1.2 million you'll lose, you need to charge the city and the county that and probably much more for not only collecting but administering a very complex state sales tax, a complex local sales tax, a utility tax, and the gross receipts tax with the pyramiding, including the surcharges on top of the 650 billing codes. Sir, you're from a hospital, you know about billing codes. The GRU bill is a very difficult animal, and we don't need garbage and stormwater charged off functionally like a customer charge, because it's very unfair to the small, low-income user. It's devastating. And the fees are going up because they're using the solid waste fund to fix the roads, and they're moving toward all-electric garbage trucks, sir, which is a fantasy. And it's a joke. And it's more Kool-Aid being poured down the throat of already overburdened ratepayers. The price per gallon, 96 gallon, 51 cents, 64 gallons, 61 cents, 35 gallons, 91 cents, and 20 gallons, $1.23. An ugly, regressive, cruel, and unfair pricing scheme, sir, which certainly doesn't promote zero waste. It promotes regressive policies that poor people cannot survive. Nowhere in your information do you have information about the disconnects, the involuntary disconnects. At every meeting, Mr. Belarski should announce how many people had their electricity shut off for non-payment. Finally, this page with all your plants about to be retired, according to Energy Supply, you do not have a plan for these plants facing retirement, and one has been prematurely shut down, Deer Haven 1. We have no idea what it would cost to keep running them, and we need those numbers.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Josh. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Anthony Johnson. I passed out a handout for what I was going to be speaking about. But first I want to thank you, for your service. And I thank you for moving in the direction of changing the Tier 1, Tier 2 rating system. We needed that. That's been long overdue. And I thank you for moving in that direction. But I do have a couple of points I'm going to make about that. But first of all, I did get an email from GRU talking about, comparing the rates to FPL, Clay, GRU. I wasn't sure, it was unclear if that included the taxes, but once I ran mine, I see that it does not include the taxes, that $136.60. So I'm not sure if all the others include taxes as well. So it's kind of unclear. So you may want to work on that, make it clear. All those utilities that fee there includes taxes, or not include taxes. But the move to raise the Tier 1 rate to 1,000 kilowatts was great. I would like to see it going to 1,100, but I'd take the 1,000. But now, the fluctuating billing days is a thing I'm concerned about. As you see my bill here for January, I had 31 days on the billing, so that knocked I can't stay in Tier 1 with 31 days. Not possible. With the weather we're having, it's not possible. We got to stay at 28 days. We used to be at 28 days consistently. But now when you're going up to as high as 33 days, there's no way you can stay in Tier 1. So that's going to be a cost passed on to the ratepayer. And, and HB 1645 was about trying to relieve pressure on the ratepayers. So I was wondering, since we have smart metering, why do we even have to have fluctuating billing days? I mean, keep it at 28. Okay, if we were to do that, that would be great. You can roll back to the 22 levels of the tiers along with the 28 billing days. You have took a huge step in satisfying HB 1645 as far as it relates to the ratepayers. I mean, that's something to think about. The other thing I want to talk about, you had a notification out about raising your credit card from 500 to 1,000. I mean, is it possible that ratepayers can apply to have that raised to a higher number, a higher amount? You know, is that something that's a one-size-fits-all? Can say I would like my cap to be 2,000. Is that possible to do something like that? I mean, there are reasons to want to do that. So, but all these changes that you're making, please codify them in some way. They're out there, but they're not codified. So that means we could revert back to what we had. So look into codifying your changes and keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is CEO comments.
I have an overhead to show you. It actually works very nicely with, I'll put it up there in a minute. I'll answer a couple of the questions first. I think there have been enough questions that have been elicited that there should be a response to some of them. On the issue of us spending $300,000 on fluoride, we spent $35,000, so it's a little, it's 1/10 of that number, and we used 9,000 gallons. The fact that we have boilerplate language in one of the forms, that's required by EPA. They require that you put a possible source, and part of that is fertilizer. It mentions several other sources, and there is an indigenous amount of fluoride in our water. We measured it about 0.3 parts per million, and the limit is 0.7. So I just want people to understand that there will be fluoride in your water, whether you raise it to 0.7. If you don't do anything, you're going to get 0.3 parts per million. And that's a decision on the part of the board. The public notice was in time. We did issue the public notice in time. It's been customary for us to put the agenda out a week ahead of time. We had a couple things that we had to put together, and we're trying to shoot for that, but we put the public notice out in time. In regard to the rate stabilization question, I'll let Mark address that if you want to hear about that. And in terms of the GFT calculation, I think you're all aware that we started at around the $15 million, and then we recouped that part of the $68 million over the next 10 years. And then there have been some other costs that were entered. There were agreements that we entered into with the city that allowed us to reduce the GFT further. In regard to the IRP, we're executing on it. We're actually pursuing it. The IRP is not a perpetual revision. We said put your pencils down. It's being executed upon, and we're looking for different options. Then the last gentleman asked about the comparisons. The comparisons don't have any taxes in them, so it's apples to apples. We have fluctuating days in our billing schedule because we still read water meters. We're not, and there still are some electric meters, so we still have dozens and dozens of routes that have to be scheduled for those readings. It's very typical for the industry to have to ensure that you have people to service those routes over the course of the month, and that's why you have them on different, because you can't do it all in the same day. We don't have enough people to do all of them in one day. In regard to moving the maximum credit payment up above $1,000, there's a cost associated with that. We tried to minimize that cost to the customers, so we doubled it, thought that was a good idea. We're looking for options later. I mean, we're looking for, once we get AMI fully implemented, that we could get Venmo, a whole host of other ways to pay your bills that will help the customer. So I think that answers the questions I had written down. So,
Mr.
Yeah,
CEO,
sure.
real quick, sorry, White, because you answered some of those, I wanted to touch on some.
Sure.
I'm sorry. But the reason we don't do the 28 billing cycle, that's a thing that they came up with years ago to get an extra cycle out of you. So that's 13 cycles in a year. So it's actually 30.4 days per cycle. Once we get on AMI, there'll be more consistency. But years ago, people started doing 28-day billing cycles to get an extra month out of you, and it seemed easier. And then, Mr. Bilarski, please correct me if I'm wrong. I know we got roughly 0.3 parts per million of fluoride in the system. We can max out at 0.7, but we don't hit the max out.
That's correct.
So, you know, and again, and I'm listening to everybody, and I'm actually reading, and I'm doing my homework, trust me. And I do think this is something we're going to be talking about relatively soon. But we're not hitting the 0.7 on a consistent basis, correct?
That's absolutely true.
Okay.
Isn't it 4 parts per million, the highest we can go? Or?
No, 0.7 is the max, but we don't like to go, we don't want to get ourselves going over the max. So there's a safety zone, if you will, for that. I'd have to get somebody that actually does the work back in the back of the room to get you that exact number if you wanted to hear it.
I'm just looking back there for nods, is she?
1.0 is the max, 0.7 is our target.
Okay, 0.7 is the target. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. So with that, I just wanted to, I think that's readable for everyone. There's been a lot of discussion about our bills. And I think it's really important to understand that the GRU provides for these services: electric, water, wastewater, and natural gas. And for years, we've maintained this schedule. It's called the basket of services for residential bills. And so you have Fort Pierce, we have Vero Beach, Tampa, Ocala. You can see them up there. There's a bar that goes across. And you can see that there's a total for each one of those when you include what the services would be if a customer in that territory had a utility service. So for example, Fort Pierce, they have their own electric company. They also have services for gas, water, and wastewater. I don't believe they all have those services. So if they were to get bills from several different customers, their bills would be $314 a month based on the standard that everyone looks at: 1,000 kW of electricity, kWhs, 25 therms of gas, 7,000 gallons of water, and 7,000 gallons of wastewater. If you look, Gainesville's up there at 265. It's 3 away from the bottom of the pack in our region. I don't think we focus on this enough. You look at the electric side of that, Gainesville's at $136.60. It's a little higher than Clay Electric at $132, lower than Tallahassee, higher than all the other ones except for Tampa and Ocala. But look at the natural gas that we provide, $35.74. Literally the lowest. Actually, we think we're close to the lowest in the state. And our water and wastewater are about average. So when people talk about GRU bills, we're really low for this area. We have a higher electric bill, but in comparison, what ends up happening is, you can see Clay County there. Clay County is serviced by Clay Electric, $132 electric bill. What people do is they say, hey, my $132 Clay County or Clay Electric bill compares to GRU's $265 for service utility. We can't do that. That's not apples to apples, that's apples to oranges. So if you look at what somebody that has a hookup with a utility in Clay County, they'd be paying People's Gas $68, and they'd be paying Clay County Water Authority $29.31 and $60.96. They'd be paying Clay County total bill of $290.50. GRU's $265. But nobody does that. They look at the one bill and they say, GRU, why don't you match that? We can't. We provide 3 other services. So I'll get back off my soapbox here, but I always hear about the bills. And I think it's really, really important to understand you're getting a lot more with GRU. And on top of it, Jim Conish is right, we're billing for stormwater, we're billing for garbage on top of it. That's not even included in any of those things. You don't have to write 4 checks, you don't have to write all these things. It's one service. So, just wanted to give you that information.
You looked right at me, so you know I had a question. I'm sorry, sir. So also, another thing that would be very interesting is the ratio of taxes that we charge compared to those other counties, because that's a significant amount of our bill. So can we do that?
Yes, we can
Next
look.
time? See
Anything you
what-
want to look at.
Yeah, so I would love, Mr. Chair, we can see what we charge in tax versus those comparables, because you're going to find another interesting situation perhaps.
We will do that.
I got something off of something you said because it got me thinking about the math.
I'm sorry I started.
No, you're good. You're good. The 28-day versus the every single day. I understand why we can't do that yet. I'm fine with that. But if we could do that, it's not like we're charging for, say, insurance where we're adding a bill, right? We're charging for. Would there be a cost difference? Would it possibly be lower for a customer to get 13 bills at 28 days? I mean, I know you probably don't know that off the top of your head.
Oh, no, I would, because it would be, because then you would get the fixed charges.
Fixed charges,
that we
okay,
cover for
okay.
overhead, one extra bill
Okay.
and a, yeah.
Well, I want to make sure we're doing the best we can to keep it.
Well, and that's, I'm glad you brought that up,
Yeah.
actually, because that's the other thing that the dynamic scheduler does. And that's actually a thing. It's not a guy in a corner that we call the dynamic scheduler. It's a program that we run that has an algorithm to make sure that we don't give people 2 bills in 1 month. Because then people really get mad at us.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope that's able to clarify the question for everybody, at least, because it had me curious too when you said it that way. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolarski. The next item on the agenda is the attorney comments.
Chair Lawson, we have our hearing scheduled on April 2nd in front of Judge Wright. We've filed our motion for summary judgment. The City of Gainesville has filed their motion for summary judgment in that case where we're questioning the validity of the referendum. And of course, as you know, a temporary injunction has been rendered. We're seeking a permanent injunction now in that lawsuit. And we're both going through a procedure which is called a motion for summary judgment. The facts are aligned both on the city's side and our side, and there's not disputed material issues of fact on either side is what we're telling the judge. And then now it becomes a legal argument as to our argument of the case and the city's argument of the case. And the judge is going to sort all that out and then render a ruling sometime after April 2nd. So that's what's going on in that case. To Board Member Haslam's initial comments, we're defending House Bill 1645, and we believe that the intent and purpose of that bill, and this is in our argument, is to, and you're commanded to have a pecuniary interest, a business interest as a board member here. That's what you're charged with. And the intent and spirit of that bill is to do exactly what we're talking about with these rates and to lessen the rates. And we believe that that is the bill's intent and purpose is to help our citizenry with lowering the rates, and that will provide a betterment overall to our community. To Board Member Haslam's comments, when we get to the point where the debt service structure, and again, that's one of the things that you are required to look at under 1645, once we get to that point, if there's an ability to also help with the general fund transfer, then we have that ability to do that as well. So that's what that lawsuit is all about. That's the nature of it, and those are the arguments that'll be before Judge Wright. As Board Member Haslam said, there's another lawsuit that's been filed. It states that you individually, as well as the collective board, have violated the law in what is called quo warranto. And quo warranto is an anachronistic type of procedure in the law that says by what authority are you operating. So the law is the lawsuit is claiming that because of the referendum, you don't have the authority to serve any longer as the board, and it's questioning your right to do so. We believe that's invoking constitutional elements and arguments. So we're going to vigorously defend that lawsuit as well. We've accepted service of process on your behalf, each of you individually as well as the board. We will file motions and responsive pleadings to that lawsuit within 20 days is our anticipation. I know both of the attorneys on the other side, Gary Edinger and Tara Arline, they're both fine attorneys, they're very good attorneys. They're making their argument well and ably in the lawsuit, but we certainly have a different opinion as to the law and also the nature of the case. So we'll be vigorously defending that and filing the appropriate responsive pleadings and motions in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, I believe that all these lawsuits are harming GRU, and they're also harming our customers. And I've talked to Ed about, I think we need to be explaining who's suing us and the cost that our customers are having to pay for this. And I also want to research other responses to these lawsuits. So I have a lot of additional thoughts about it.
One of the things I'd like to add, Mr. Chair, is that to keep in mind that obviously nothing happens in a vacuum. So we're talking about two cases, but the resolution of the case that we're going for hearing on April 2nd may be dispositive of the second lawsuit as well. So just to keep in mind that there may be some interplay there.
Interestingly, both cases are assigned to the same judge, so these are not new issues to the judge. There is an interplay and intertwining of the arguments in both cases. And so procedurally, they're kind of moving in a different rate of speed because the City of Gainesville lawsuit has been in play for a longer period of time, but certainly the issues are very similar.
Thanks for the update.
Sure.
Of course.
Does anyone have any questions?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it is public record who's done this lawsuit, right? The Snowy lawsuit? The names of the people who-
It's a lawsuit that's been filed by Jason Bellamy Foltz and Robert Louis Murmer against Gainesville Regional Utilities Authority, Craig Carter in his individual capacity, David Haslam, individually Jack Jacobs, individually Eric Lawson, individually, and Robert Chip Skinner individually. So yes.
I actually knew that. I just wanted you to say it. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's sued so much of my life.
All right, you're lucky.
Thank you. This begins the business discussion items. 2025-104, December 2024 financial position. And the recommended motion is just for information only.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. As she stated, this is the financial update for the quarter ending December 31st. My plan is to just hit the first 5 or 6 combined system level slides, and if you've got any questions about the detail, I'll be happy to address them, but that's what I'd like to do. I want to start off with a little caveat I always give when we're talking about 3 months worth of information. It's a little difficult to develop, meaningful trends over just a quarter, but we've tried to put together what we think are the important pieces of that. So this is kind of the conclusion up front. As you can see, well, let me start with, there's nothing in the first quarter that gave us any concern, nothing that gave us any heartburn, certainly nothing that would cause us to change our budget projections for the balance of the year. As you can see up here, if you look at the actuals as of December 31st of 2024 for the surplus after the GFT, the actuals were about 1.01 million, while the budget was 1.06 million. So they're right on top of each other. The one thing that I would like to mention up here that looks like something like an anomaly is comparing the actual surplus at December 31st of 2023 to the surplus at 2024, there's a difference of about $11 million. Well, there's two anomalies that are driving that. One is in 24, we deposited over $6 million more into the rate stabilization fund as of the end of the first quarter than we did in 23. When we make deposits into the rate stabilization fund, what that comes out as a reduction in revenue on the income statement. So that accounts for about half of that difference. The other difference is, if you'll remember, we had the sale of the trunking radio system in 23, and the gain on that sale makes up the other piece of that gap between 12 million and 1. But I'll reiterate, looking at these things in total, there's nothing in these numbers at December 31st that are particularly unexpected for us. This is some more top-level numbers. As you can see, our revenues at the end of the first quarter a little more than 1% above what we're budgeted. It's driven by what you see in the light blue area. Our volume sales for 3 of our 4 systems are higher, a little higher than we expected, and that's what's driving that piece. The O&M expenses, net of fuel and depreciation, are about 2.5% higher than what we budgeted. The primary factor behind that is we, as part of our budget, we make an estimation as to how much of our labor is going to go to capital and how much of it's going to go to O&M. The first quarter of the fiscal year is traditionally a slow quarter for capital projects, and that's what's happened here. While we budgeted for the year about 31% of labor going to capital, at the end of the first quarter, it's only about 24%. That labor that's not going to capital is going to O&M, and so that's what's driving it. By the time we get to the end of the fiscal year, we fully expect that that's going to have modified and we'll be pretty close to where we expected to be on our capital spend. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, this is a little difficult to see, but if you look at the top line, this goes back to the points I was making about that difference between the profit at December 31st, 23 versus 24. The top line, the revenue net of fuel, you can see there's about a $5 million difference in 23 and 24. That's being driven by that deposit into the rate stabilization fund. And on the non-operating expense, you can see it's almost more than $6 million higher in 24. That's because we had the gain from the sale in 23, reducing that expense. And that's really the key, the highlights on this slide. We like to keep this out in front of you. We talk about this a lot. This is the trends in the accelerated debt reduction. You can see in 24, we spoke about this at our last meeting. We accelerated the retirement of almost $40 million in principal in 24. When you tack on the $35 million from our scheduled principal payments, we had $75 million in principal reduction in 24. The budget number in 25 is a little less than $30 million. The difference between those two, between the actual in 24 and the budget in 25, once again goes back to the fact that we took the $8 million in proceeds from the trunking radio sale, used all of that for debt reduction.
And since Mark is pointing out certain things, just want you all to remember that's where the GFT reduction is going. When you hear folks talk about they want the GFT to go back to the city, well, at the previous levels, we wouldn't be able to do this without that. Sorry, Mike.
That's okay. And this is, got this slide in here. We generally give you a little idea of where we're going on our capital expense, but this reaffirms that point. You can see in the first quarter of 23 and 24, our capital expenditures are traditionally low, but they pick up and they, over the last 3 quarters, we've seen that in fiscal 25. We expect that's going to happen, and that's what's going to take care of that 2.5% O&M expense that's higher than budget. On average, over the past 3 full fiscal years, we've spent about 15% of what we actually spent over the entire years in that first quarter. So it's There's nothing unusual about this. And everything else on this slide presentation is simply by a detail by system rolls up to the numbers you've already seen. I'm happy to go through as many of these slides as you want, but I think I've given you the highlights of what we wanted to get across. But if you've got any questions, happy to answer them.
The only thing I'd say is I don't think most people understand how important it is we get our debt down, what it means to our bond ratings and everything else. To Mr. Bilarski's point, we're making a better utility, a better business by reducing debt, like you would in your household. You might not see it today in your electric bill, but you will see it years from now.
That's a good point, and it'll be reaffirmed again in a few minutes when I come back and talk about debt and liquidity, because Ed's right. The accelerated debt reduction is all about identifying free cash to make those payments, and the single largest piece of the pool that we're putting aside to accelerate the reduction of debt is coming from the GFT, but it is also, that reduction in the GFT is also benefiting our liquidity numbers, which is something that's extremely important, both in giving us the financial flexibility, because while we plan to use that GFT reduction to address debt, if we had a financial crisis on another front, and that reduction in the GFT would allow us to use it for whatever need we have out there. But you're right, that's the primary driver in our ability to start addressing the debt piece. And you've all read all the rating agency reports, and each and every rating agency report, that's the first thing they talk about, is the fact that GRU is highly leveraged, and we need to address that if in fact we want to look at a potential rating increase in the future.
Thanks, Mark.
The next item on the agenda is 2025-105, State of the Utility, Fiscal Year 25, December. The recommendation is that the GRU Authority hear a monthly update from the utilities' operational areas.
And while Mr. Brown comes up to the podium, I do want to give a plug to the Budget, Finance, and Accounting Group. They just completed the audit. Well, they didn't do the audit. We had an outside firm do the audit. But it was a clean opinion. And what I understand from Claudia and Mark was that there were no findings. And I went, none? There's got to be something. I said, no findings.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, thank you. It's amazing.
On behalf of my, primarily on the accounting group, I thank you. Like Ed said, do any of the work. We've got accountants that are behind the scenes doing that. So.
Well, I actually like to see that smile on your face. So.
I was smiling because Ed's backhanded compliment about no findings. I think he secretly would like to have at least one so that he could point to the fact that the auditors were doing their work. But if the controller were here, he would tell you most definitely that they did a thorough job of reviewing our financial statements. It's been a multi-month process when they go through that.
Good job.
I'm publicly saying great job.
Thank you, Ed.
I recorded that for you.
Yes, appreciate it.
Chair Lawson, directors, Tom Brown, Chief Operating Officer at GRU. I'm here to discuss any questions you might have relative to the December State of the Utility Report. I think you'll find it's in a slightly different format than it was the previous month. We kind of went back to the future and put it back in the format fairly close to what it was several years ago. I think there's a lot of information contained in it if you have the opportunity to take a look through and analyze the numbers. A couple things I would highlight, I think, on a safety perspective. We had one injury during the month. That's one too many, obviously. Actually happened in the admin area. I think a cash drawer fell on somebody's foot. So, but overall, it was a good month. I think we've had 4 accidents year to date, 1 first aid, 4 recordables in the fiscal year. I would like to add that today I had the opportunity to attend a brief celebration out at our Power Systems Control. They celebrated 5,000 days without a recordable incident in their group. So I wish we could say that it was across the board, across the organization, but at least in one area, they've done an outstanding job and continue to do that. I think on 21st of December, we reached 3 years in energy supply without a recordable. So that's the whole division without an injury. So that's pretty good as well. Yeah. Accident-wise, we had one vehicle collision in December. Actually, take that back. We had two. We had one preventable and one non-preventable for a total of 2. So, considering we drive about 2.2 million miles a year, not quite 200,000 miles a month, you know, you think about that in your own personal terms. If you drive 12,000 miles a year, how many years of driving that is, and think, when was the last time you had a minor collision? If you could go 15, 20 years without one, you're doing a pretty good job. But again, we try and do better. We will. But that's where we're at with that. A couple other things I think, you know, December's obviously occurred. A couple things that happened in January I think I'd like to just bring to your attention real quickly. We talked last time I was up here about Deer Haven Renewable, which was in a scheduled outage with the turbine. It was actually, the whole facility returned to service on the 29th of January. Startup went very smooth, very few issues. And that's a real testament to the people that did the work. I always look at how they stumble when they come back. There's very complex systems. There's usually something that gives you a hard time. They had a really nice startup. And they finished doing the tuning on it this past week. And actually, they, as a result of the outage, we're able to stabilize the unit so that we can achieve ramp rates of about 2.5 megawatts per minute all the way from start all the way up to 105 megawatts. Previously, we had a little bit of a glitch at 60. We had to sit there and let the unit stabilize, and then we could bring the unit up. If you can imagine, when you burn gas, it goes in and it burns instantaneously, but anyone that's thrown a log on a campfire knows it doesn't start to burn right away. It takes a while. And tree chips are no different. So when you're feeding these in there and trying to bring the overall load up, it just takes a little bit of time to transition. The other number I think is interesting is the peak output had been 102 megawatts. And with the work they've done with the variable frequency drive fans and some other things at the plant, we're able to now get 105. So it's another 3% of production out of the unit. So that's always a good thing to get. We're currently prepping for an outage at the Kelly plant next door here. It'll begin on the 23rd, be down for several months. So the only thing I would highlight too, if you might have noticed, it got a little bit cold in January. Got very cold, got down in the 28, and there was a couple days we had to actually go on solid and liquid fuels. So it was kind of nice to have that fuel diversity during that time. So kind of went through it without any disruption in power to our customers. And one other thing I'm going to mention here is on this past Wednesday, we recharged a Mercaptan in our gas stations. There's 5 gas stations around the city. And I don't know if you know what Mercaptan is, but that's when you turn gas on and it isn't lit, that's what you smell. And I got to tell you, in a concentrated form, this stuff puts a skunk to shame. I mean, 1 or 2 drops would literally smell up the whole town. So for our guys to go out there and recharge all the stations and do it without creating any kind of odors, I'm very grateful. I always get a little bit nervous with that, but they do an outstanding job with it, and kudos to those people. So if you have any other questions, I'll be glad to address them. If not, I thank you for your time.
Just curious about Kelly. That's not the new system we just put in at Kelly that's going down for 2 months, right? Didn't we just upgrade Kelly?
We did. We updated the turbine generator about, I guess, about 4 years ago now.
Okay.
It's been a while.
Dang, it seems like I just saw the tent out there the other day. Okay, well, okay.
Yeah, the work they're doing, they have a uninterruptible power supply that has to be replaced. They're doing some lining on the circulating water pipes that go from the cooling tower back to the condenser. They're going to go in there with robots and inspect them and coat the lines with the pipes with epoxy. It's kind of the principal driver, and there's a few other things that's given them a little bit of fits. So it's good to take them down and get those things squared away.
Thank you.
So we have a nice, reliable summer.
I actually do have something quick. The incident reports as far as accidents, automotive accidents, stuff like that, does that include, like, if we may have a contractor working for us, I know we had some contractors doing like the water installs, does that include those numbers too?
I'm sorry, one more time.
So if we have a contractor working for us and they have a car accident, do your numbers include that as well?
Contractor accidents?
Yeah.
No, it would just be GRU employees,
Okay,
but
just
I'm not
curious.
aware of our contractors having any accidents.
No, neither am I. I'm just curious of how those numbers are all added together.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just because it's come up numerous times, if, Ed, we could see the number of disconnects included in the state of the utilities just under customer service, just so that it is available. If the rest of the board, I'm interested in seeing exactly where that's trending and what it's doing.
I'd be interested too, but if there's a way to differentiate between maybe people who aren't paying versus people who have like abandoned the utility.
Yeah.
Because I know we have a lot of college students that they disappear, right? And are they paying their last bill or not? So I would hate our numbers to look ridiculous. We disconnected somebody
Yes.
left.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'd agree with
So
that.
that'd be, when you look at all this information, I want to make sure we're looking at all of it because, oh, you disconnected 300 people. Well, it was because 1,000 kids left.
Yeah.
So if we can kind of differentiate between, I don't know how hard that would be, but that would make more sense to me than just people.
It'd be for
non-payment
disconnects.
Yes.
Right. No, I mean, we capture that information, that's fine. In fact, I mean, we're trying to develop some metrics across the organization right now. And, it was even brought up about allowance, for uncollectibles and things. And it's remarkable how close we are with most utilities, across the state. And that's what I want to be able to do. We have some different information that we're getting from different sources that can provide a good barometer for some of these key performance indicators. And certainly we can do that.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Appreciate
Oh,
it.
but Tom, are you going to collect the parts you gave out last time? We might need them.
The turbine blades?
I left it at home.
Well, I got to tell you, just as a general comment, our guys, I think, performed nothing short of a miracle where we found the damage to that turbine. They were able to go out and solicit new blades. They had to find the material. They had to schedule the shop time, and they had to get the blades made, QC'd, whatever, brought into our country through customs into the shop over here, get it reassembled, and the turbine rebalanced. And they did that in probably less than 2 months. And in this day and age where the supply chain can be measured in years, I mean, since 2019 with COVID, getting anything that just has such long lead times on it, for them to actually get that performance out of the market and get the unit back online as quick as they did, I think was incredible. In fact, Ed, if you remember when I first found the damage, yeah, she said, I don't remember anything. We first started talking about it. I said it wouldn't surprise me if it was down 9 months, at least 9 months to a year. I mean, that type of thing, just because the availability of parts on the repair. But we had a good outcome.
Thank you so much. It's great.
Yep.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. The next business discussion item is 2025-110, liquidity and reserve metrics. And the recommendation is information only, sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if you recall at the last board meeting, the board asked that staff come back in future meetings and discuss individual metrics in a little more depth, talk about the description of the metric, the relevance of it, where we stand compared to our own benchmarks and some of our peers, and what steps we might be taking to improve those ratios that needed improvement. And so what staff's plan is to come back at the end of each quarter at the same time we present the financial update and discuss one metric, or in this case, one set of metrics that are like in nature. So the first one we're going to talk about is liquidity and reserves. And basically, these assessments measure our ability to deal with fluctuations in cash flow, volatility in operating expenses, and in some cases, unforeseen short-term capital needs. But we, like everybody else, value flexibility as a critical characteristic of our financial plan. It determines or it looks at our ability to deal with immediate needs from the cash flows that we have on hand, reserves and lines of credit. But at the end of the day, what it really measures is if you don't have any more incremental cash flows coming in, how long can you operate? And that's at the bottom line. That's what these are set to measure. And there's two metrics that we look at that rating agencies consider important. One's days cash on hand, and one is total days liquidity. And so first, we'll talk about days cash on hand. Fitch and Moody's utilize this metric. S&P does not. The formula for this metric is unrestricted cash divided by average daily operating expense. As you can see, if you look in those boxes, the two agencies have different formulas for coming to the same ratio. Fitch uses operating fund cash, rate stabilization fund cash, and our utility plant improvement fund cash. Moody's, and for reasons that I can't fully explain, uses our fuel hedging account and our utility meter deposits as part of this ratio, but they don't include utility plant improvement fund. Fuel hedging is not unrestricted. We have that in a margin account. We have to keep it there based on the number of options we have out there. And utility deposits they're not even, we represent them on our balance sheet, but they're not our money. We return them to customers based on their payment history. Why Moody's does this, I don't know, but it is in there. That's what accounts for the difference in the numbers and what should be, similarly measured metric. But if you look on the left-hand side, what we've done is we've got the trend based on our Fitch numbers, and you can see at the end of 24, it was 221 days. We wanted to measure, how that stood against some other entities. What we call our Florida peers is a group of, Tallahassee Electric, Lakeland Electric, OUC, and JEA. They are in the yellowish color, and their number is, the median of those four is 252. Moody's also publishes, based on where they have entities rated, medians for those. And so we are an A+ rated utility under Fitch. The median for the other entities that Fitch has in that category, the median days cash on hand is 82. So at 221, we're significantly ahead of them. The next rating up is AA-, as you can see on this slide. That's 214. So we're basically, our days cash on hand is higher than the median for who Fitch has rated slightly higher than us. Our goal for this, and we talked about this during the budget hearings, is 250. We want to reach 250 days cash on hand by the end of the financial forecast period, which is, each one of our forecast periods is 10 years. So that's where we're looking to move towards. But both of these are very strong, as you can see, both from just the rating agency metric and where we compare against our peers.
And Mark, what you were telling me is that the strong liquidity allows us to fund short-term issues. So, for example, replacing the turbine, we didn't have to issue debt and take on additional debt. We were able to fund that.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the lead, and I'm going to talk about that a couple slides down. But it does a couple of things for us. It allows us to handle those unforeseen needs. Having this liquidity on hand and some of the actions that I'll describe in a slide or two that increased our liquidity also allows us to cash fund projects like AMI, CIS. It allows us to, our utility plant improvement fund is our internal equity, and we shoot for funding capital projects, on a 50-50 basis. Improving the liquidity and keeping cash in that utility plant improvement fund allows us to do that. And those keep costs down, they keep our liquidity numbers high, and as we'll talk about, they counterbalance, the leverage issues we were talking about before that the rating agencies see. Our strong liquidity numbers basically are what's holding us in the rating categories that we're in now. So the other measure that we're going to talk about is liquidity days on hand. And the difference between liquidity and cash on hand is simply liquidity includes agreements such as lines of credit, letters of credit, authorized but unissued commercial paper. In essence, these are agreements that allow us access to cash on a short-term basis. It's not cash on our balance sheet, but if we need it, we can get it. We have 3 of those right now. We have a $25 million tax-exempt line of credit with Truist Bank. We have a $50 million taxable line of credit with Truist, and we have a $150 million line of credit with U.S. Bank that can be taxable or tax-exempt, depending on the nature for which we draw the money. Tax-exempt lines can only be used for capital projects. Taxable lines are more flexible. They can help us address any short-term need that we have. Once again, I'd like to say that it's a straightforward calculation, but it's not. The 3 different rating agencies have different combinations of what they include in our unrestricted money in terms of those lines of credit. Moody's and Fitch allow the $150 million U.S. Bank line of credit as part of that calculation. S&P includes the $50 million taxable line of credit with Truist as well on top of that. S&P also has a little bit different definition of average daily operating expense. They throw in GFT. So that's why you're going to see 3 different numbers up here for the same metric depending on the rating agency and the particular vagaries of their formula. All of these numbers, though, if you want to look at those liquidity numbers at I believe it's 440 for Fitch, 451 for Moody's, and 484 for S&P are extremely strong. And like I said, these are the numbers that are allowing us to counterbalance what we've got out there on the leverage side with the rating agencies.
And I would point out, if you look at our liquidity versus the peer groups, we're dramatically higher. And the reason for that, as was explained to me, is because of our heavy debt load. Our rating agencies are somewhat requiring us to have a much higher liquidity. So as we reduce our debt, we don't have to maintain so much cash on hand.
Sort of a safety net.
And all these revolving credit lines, that costs. There's an expense that comes along with that. So again, as we accelerate our debt reduction, this is another thing that will improve.
That's an excellent point, and they are not cheap. I wouldn't want anybody to think that these lines of credit are cheap. However, what I can tell you is that if you don't have this liquidity and you come to a point where you need it, you can probably get it, but if you're going to get it on that short-term basis, it's going to be extremely expensive. And I would also point out that prior to the line of credit we had with U.S. Bank, we had commercial paper that we had authorized but unissued. The line of credit we have with U.S. Bank is considerably cheaper than what we were paying for the commercial paper. So while it is relatively costly to maintain these, this is a very economic way to keep this level of liquidity. And you're right, it's not static, it's dynamic. We'll look at where we stand in our cash and our leverage and adjust those accordingly. These are generally 3-year agreements, and so that, they're not necessarily long-term. We can move those as we need to.
The other thing I'd point out, I know Mark knows this, and we chatted about it, but I think it needs to be said that the cost of these lines of credit are far smaller than the cost of a downgrade. And so it's actually a cost-benefit analysis. If we were to have a downgrade, it could cost $25 million, whereas it's a fraction of that number in terms of what the cost of these lines of credit are.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And then the final slide, one of the questions and one of the things that you wanted us to address was what kind of measures have we been taking to address some of our shortcomings. And Ms. Rasnick, I think, has on several occasions noted that when she became CFO, one of the first challenges she had was we had forecasts that we were going to have negative cash. That was back in 17 and 18. We started taking steps to address that. We issued the 2019 bonds. It replenished our UPIF funds. It generated near-term debt service savings that replenished our cash. We put in a cash management policy that set target levels this board, reaffirmed those levels in the fall. We codified those levels inside our debt management policy. What I'm legally, required to say every time I address this for Ed is that the reduction in GFT, plays a large role in that. Several years ago, that GFT was $38 million. It's $8 million now. The reduction in that expense payment is part of what, has provided us with that liquidity. Putting the lines of credit in were the final piece of that. And so we have, we identified the problem. We've worked specifically to address it. Mr. Chair, as you said, it's something that's dynamic, it's fluid. We'll continue to address it and monitor it and manage it as our numbers dictate. So that's what I had. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. We will come back. Next time we come back with metrics will be in April with our March statements, and we'll probably cover our coverage ratios, our debt service coverage ratios at that time.
Any questions? Thanks for the report. Thank you.
I would add, if you stay there one more minute there, Mark, as we're going through these are the building blocks for you to understand how we put our budget together and why we had some of the things in there. But there are a couple of things that you talk about that I don't know if everybody on the board is familiar with. I mean, we deal with this all the time, but you did mention commercial paper versus getting a bank loan. Could you just explain to the board about what that is? Because we're unique in that we issue our own commercial paper. Not all utilities do that.
We do issue commercial paper, and generally though we go external to do that. The real point I would make about commercial paper, number one, it's more expensive. Number two, it's not 24-hour access. It's an agreement with a bank, with a capital entity. It's usually a bank that they provide us access to a line of credit. We pay a maintenance fee for that, whether we draw or not. When we draw down, the rates on commercial paper are particularly high, but it's also generally a 30 to 45 day time period before you can access that cash. We're not always going to be fortunate enough when we have an unforeseen issue that it's going to be something that we have that amount of time to deal with. The line of credit that we substituted for that commercial paper is much more flexible, it's cheaper, it's much easier to administer. And we structured our liquidity such that we have a bridge between the time an event occurs, what tool we use to meet that, and ultimately getting to, if it's a longer term issue, to the time frame where we can actually issue longer term debt to address that, because the longer term debt's going to be cheaper. Even intermediate term debt's going to be cheaper. This liquidity structure will get us from the day of the event to the day that we can access that longer term liquidity. I would be remiss, because I tried to do this when we met on the one-on-ones. The credit metrics that we do are put together by Ms. Fiore, sitting back there in the back, raising her hand. She's the budget rates and forecasting manager. You're going to be seeing a lot more of her sitting up here instead of me doing this. I'm sure you'll find that much to your favor. But she does the work on that. It's a lot of work putting together our internals and then reconciling them with the rating agencies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. The next item on the agenda is a resolution. I will remind you there is a roll call vote after that. I will read the complete title into the record. And then the recommendation is that the GRUA adopt the proposed resolution authorizing participation in a natural gas prepayment transaction between the Gas Authority and TD Bank. The complete title is as such: 2024-106, Resolution of the Gainesville Regional Utilities Authority, a unit of city government of the City of Gainesville, Florida, approving the execution, delivery, and performance of one or more natural gas supply agreements with Municipal Gas Authority of Georgia, the Gas Authority, and other documents respecting natural gas prepayment transactions with Main Street Natural Gas.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion and a correction. I believe that was 2025-106, not 2024.
It absolutely is. The correct title would be 2025-106.
Sir, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the resolution as stated.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Public comment?
Good evening, Chuck Ross again. I just had one question. In the agenda, it indicates there's an annual savings projected. I'd like to, because there's nothing attached providing an explanation or backing up how that was arrived at. So I would like to know how it was arrived at and see the worksheets or whatever's involved with figuring out what that is. And I know it's a projection, but there's got to be some way you figured it out. Thank you.
I'd like to know, my name's Don Sugar, and I'd like to know is why we're giving away our GFT to the city of Gainesville. We should keep that in-house at the GRU. We shouldn't be giving GRU anything, because why would somebody sue you? It's like slapping you in the face or stealing from you. That's what City of Gainesville has done over the years, and an individual to come here and or a person on our board to represent something of this category is harsh for me as a person who represents our city and our people. I don't see where this makes any common sense towards the growth of GRU or a growth of the city. This is something that I'm gonna be listening very close to. There's a lot I don't know yet, but I've been doing this since '79, and I'll tell you, there's been a lot of loopholes, and we need to close that gap and make GRU the star in the sky that it is for the public. So, thank you.
Thank you. Back to the board for additional questions or comments.
Again, this will be a roll call vote. Director Carter, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Jacobs?
Yes.
Director Skinner?
Yes.
Vice Chair Haslam?
Yes.
Chair Lawson?
Yes.
Motion passes with all in favor. The next item is the director comments.
I'll go first. I got another one. I'll go first real quick. You want to go?
Sure, I'll go first. This is just to piggyback on Director Haslam's comments. We're hearing a lot coming through the media and from across the street that we're robbing the city of funds, and they're blindly ignoring the past 2 decades of city commission practices, through which the city took GRU profits. They left us with a $2.5 billion biomass PPA, and they forced GRU customers to cover the costs, resulting in our highest electric rates. And then we hear also that this streetlight agreement, that we're robbing money out of the GFT for the streetlights. This is an agreement that was in place and signed by the city commission, the mayor, as well as our former general manager. So we're just holding their feet to the fire on that. And one of the things that I take solace in is our great relationship, working relationship People I've heard say that we are a groupthink. We do not meet outside this. If I send a message to Mr. Haslam, it's typically a scooter repair question or a personal question. We are not allowed to speak about these items with each other. So this is not groupthink. We were meeting individually with GRU management and sitting down and asking our own individual questions. And we are just, thankfully, we all have good common sense. That is one of the huge things I am thankful for. And we have a great organization here with the professionals. And we are not going to sit idly by no matter what organization wants us to resign. We have to continue to do this work. If we are going to run this as a business, we have to continue to do this work. We cannot sit idly by. And like Mr. Haslam said, we're going to continue to do our best possible work that we can for the benefit of our ratepayers and our community at large. We do live here. We understand people aren't happy with all of our decisions. It's impossible to make everyone happy. So we pick and choose what we can do to benefit the most amount of people at any given time. And to quote my lacrosse players in this really young generation, that is no cap.
I gotta look that one up. Yeah.
I'm gonna go home and ask mine.
Yeah, I'm gonna
There
ask
you
my
go.
daughter. Again, so what I have to say is gonna sound like last month's, but this past month I've had a couple interactions with our clients, our ratepayers, and our staff. And it's amazing to watch our staff, they're listening. There's difficult situations here. Our staff was thrown a whole mix-up of how they've done work for 100 years, this company. And the way they're responding is amazing. They're listening to our ratepayers. They're adapting when necessary. They're meeting on the phone, whatever needs to be done. But it's great when we have, let's just say, extremely squeaky wheels in town that I've known for years, that all of a sudden realize that GRU is actually going above and beyond and recognize them. And so again, hats off to staff, and you know who you are. I've been talking to you. So just thank you. You're making our job so much easier, because it's like anything else. Our rate's a little high. We got that. But you can go into a restaurant and pay a little bit more for excellent service, and you're not upset. If you're paying high and you're not getting good service, you're going to be hot. Okay, we have great service. We have great employees. Just keep it up. Please bear with us as we figure out how to bring the rates down for our employees and our ratepayers. So again, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Craig.
A couple things. One, the reason I did and thank you for kind of allowing me to, I did my director comment up front is because a lot of times, a lot of people leave, a lot of people that need to hear this want to hear it. They leave. To Mr. Conish's point, the garbage bill thing is something that's on my radar, but I don't know enough about it to just widdly-diddly do that. It could hurt GRU, it'll hurt the city, right? Because if no one's collecting the trash payments for the next 3-4 months, everybody's gonna get this huge bill from Gainesville saying, you gotta pay this, and some people aren't gonna be able to. So it's something that it's on my radar. Challenge almost accepted, but I'm not gonna do it like a crazy person. I gotta have some time to think about it, figure out what we're gonna do. The fluoride and the water thing keeps getting brought up. I don't know enough about it to speak directly on it. I made a joke last month that didn't go over well on social media. I don't know enough to really speak on it, but some of the information that was given tonight, while they were talking, I could pull out my phone and they're wrong. And then you corrected one of them too, they're wrong. So I don't know enough, and some of the people speaking don't know enough. I don't want to waste a bunch of GRU time on it yet. I'm gonna do some more personal research, and then, if it's something that needs to be addressed, I think we can, but it's gotta be off of honest input and data. To the staff here tonight, thank you for being here for a meeting that might be boring if you're just sitting here, but thank you for being here. I did want to say, talking about above and beyonds, a friend of mine owns a company that does gas appliances, stoves, all this other stuff he has to hook up. It's not just Gainesville though, it's all around. And he said by far that we have the best when it comes to whatever the gas meter is, the guys that do that and then hook up his job, we have the best. He can get it done with a phone call and it's done and they're ready to accept his work. Where down here, TCP, another company down here, he said it's weeks progress, and it holds him up from making his bottom line and making his end, because a job that in Gainesville will take 3 days can take weeks, literally takes weeks. So he's like, don't change the gas company. Whoever's doing that, keep those guys, they're great. And he's one gas company. So from a commercial standpoint, we're reaching people and they're happy about it. And also people getting their stoves installed or whatever else. If you don't have a stove for 3 weeks because the gas guy can't do his job, that's horrible. Well, here in Gainesville, if you buy a stove and you get with your gas guy, he hooks it up, it's gonna be hooked up. We're not gonna hold him up apparently. So I think that's good too. And that's yeah.
That's all I have.
Great, thanks, David. Jack?
Yeah, I'd like to address the fluoridation issue too. And I look at it this way. Every week I put muriatic acid in my pool. And I certainly don't want to drink it, and I wouldn't want to get it on my skin. It burns holes in my clothes when I splash it on me. But I'm not afraid that when I get in the pool that, my kids can't swim around and swallow some water, and it's going to affect them long term. So although these chemicals may individually have caustic properties to them and stuff like that, we're talking using them like in muriatic acid, adjust the pH of the pool, makes it cleaner. Fluoride, we're talking the minuscule amounts that we're adding to what's already naturally occurring in the water. As far as I'm concerned, the fluoridation was looked at one of the modern miracles, like the polio vaccine or pasteurizing dairy products. So when you got something like that, you really need some hard evidence to switch. And I look at some of these things that are being presented. I relate it to like eggs and butter and margarine. Like every other year, margarine's bad for you, and then butter's good for you, or eggs are bad, and then they're good. And I just hate for us to go and make a snap decision and take fluoridation out of the water, and especially since it's a long thing. And I appreciate Chair Carter having the Harvard dentist come here, who's not only just from Harvard, but he actually did the peer review research. And if you know anything about research, you want to have the peer reviewed research to back up your data if you're going to start making arguments about whether or not we should do fluoridation. So I appreciate you doing that.
He insisted, actually, but that's cool.
Yeah.
When he's got sharp instruments in my mouth, I do whatever he says.
So I'm not there yet, I'm open to listening to, things, I may change my mind if other research comes up, but I don't see it yet.
Anything else, Jack?
No, thanks.
I would just finish by saying I completely concur with how you're thinking about this.
Yep.
And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.